This is the Financially Simple Podcast, a show dedicated to destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner. And now, here's your host, pizza-loving, certified financial planner, Justin Goodbread.
Welcome to Financially Simple. This is a finance show for small business owners about money, how it works in our business and our personal lives, ultimately how we can build wealth to be financially independent. I'm your host, Justin Goodbread. Today is episode number 42. Today's episode is titled, Evaluate Yourself, Starting a Business Part 2. You know, starting a business is not for the faint of heart. It is hard. It's grueling, it's time-consuming, and let's be honest, it can be downright frustrating. You know, we never anticipate how slow the growth can be. It never grows as fast as we want it. And truth be told, once we finally get the business off the ground, if we're not careful, soon it becomes like a bucking bull at the rodeo and we're just trying to hold on and survive. Yeah, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about in that analogy. I'm sure you've seen the bull riders at the rodeo. I love to go to the rodeo. We've mentioned this in past episodes. My family and I, we have a rodeo not too far from our house, some 15, 20 minutes from down the road. And we like to go watch. And we like to watch when they do the barrel racing. We like to watch them rope the calves and how fast they do it and how the little calves are running around bouncing. We like to watch the guys on the bulls. And I tell you what, those guys, and sometimes gals, I've seen one girl ride a bull. It's pretty amazing when you think about how fast and how dangerous these bulls really are and how fast people can get hurt on that. And if we're not careful, our businesses can quickly become that way. You know, I have a plastic Apollo series rocket on my desk. You've seen the movies, I'm sure, on TV, which features this Apollo series rocket. And we've seen and know the catastrophes which transpired. Many astronauts lost their lives in one particular space explosion. Nonetheless, I've had this rocket for some 25 years now. It was given to me probably in my early 20s, maybe in my late teens. It's a Saturn V rocket, and for those of you unfamiliar with it, it's a long pinnacle-shaped rocket. It doesn't look like our modern spaceships. No, it looks more like a stick if you really want to know the truth. But what's interesting to me about this rocket is the sheer amount of energy it took to get this rocket off the launch pad. This rocket carried some 203 gallons of kerosene and some 318 gallons, and I would say 203 million gallons and 318 million gallons of liquid oxygen just needed to combust. And at the time of liftoff on this particular rocket, on my plastic model even, there are 5 different rockets or 5 different ignition thrusters on the bottom of the main rocket. And what would happen is all 5 would burst into action. You ought to watch the YouTube videos if you've never seen this. It's pretty amazing. Well, what's interesting to me on this particular rocket, and the reason why I've kept this crazy little plastic model for almost 20 some odd years now, is because this particular rocket would spend over 80% of its fuel just to get off the ground. Think about that. Millions and millions of gallons of kerosene and liquid oxygen, and tons of it right then are just used just to get it to move the first inch, 80%. Now, once they got off the launch pad, the remaining 20% of fuel would be used to get the rocket into orbit, into outer space, and ultimately bring it back home. You know, the rocket to me, and the reason why I've kept it for all these years is it's a reminder what it takes to start a business. The example of the rocket is a reminder also of most entrepreneurs, the amount of energy that we spend. Just, it seems like many times we're just running around frantic and wasting our time. But once the business is off the ground, metaphorically speaking, then it only takes a small amount of energy to continue the motion in which it's directed. But even with this knowledge, even though we see that it takes a lot of energy to get a business off the ground, why is it that some people have an easier time starting and growing a business than others? Have you ever noticed that some people just seem like they have it all together, and it's like they're just born with this golden spoon in their mouth, or everything they touch turns to gold? They have the Midas touch. I submit to you that it's more than just the Midas touch. You know, according to Forbes, 90% of startups fail. Guys, that's 9 out of 10. That is super crazy to me. A 10% success rate. Dr. John Maxwell famously stated one time, everything rises and falls on leadership. Now, if we believe that's to be the case, and everything rises and falls on leadership, then could it be, just a question, it's rhetorical in nature, but could it be that the reason for so many failures in startups is because the entrepreneur themselves were unqualified? See, I believe the answer is yes. Let me explain. In my business, I use a free online service called 16 Personalities. And I'll put a link to this in the show notes, but it's called 16 Personalities. This is a company very similar to the Myers-Briggs personality profile. In fact, just today, someone informed me that Tony Robbins has a very similar personality profile that uses a DISC model on his website. But I use 16 Personalities. They're all about the same. This is a free version. I don't have to sign up for a newsletter. And what it does is it takes an assessment of your personality profile. And this particular version, it tells us how our personality can be best used in the business world. And according to 16 Personalities, the entrepreneurial personality is comprised of the following letters: E, S, T, P. And each of these letters stand for an entrepreneurial is typically extroverted. They're a sensing individual. They're thinking, thus the T, and there's much perception. The entrepreneurial personality type is bold, it's rational, it's original, it's perceptive in its nature. An entrepreneur is often very direct, and they're very sociable. However, according to 16 Personalities, the entrepreneur can often appear insensitive. I've heard that one before. Impatient. I know that's me. Risk-prone. I've said it many times myself that if I'm going to bust now, I want to bust now and make all the mistakes I can in my 20s and 30s. That way, when I'm in my 40s and 50s, here we go. Let's go. And many times entrepreneurs can appear defiant. To add even a little more clarity to the personality profile type, the Harvard School of Business released a study called The Personality Traits of Entrepreneurs. In this study, an interesting description was written, and I'm going to read this verbatim because I think it's interesting to me. It says, in the uncertain and competitive environment of new venture creation, many researchers hypothesize that entrepreneurs thrive on a strong sense of personal self-efficiency to execute their visions in a keen eye for innovation, to identify new products and markets. Now, self-efficiency describes a person's belief that he or she can perform tasks and fulfill roles as is directly related to expectation, goals, and motivations. More specifically, what they end up saying is that entrepreneurs are comprised of these sayings. And they said, entrepreneurs are typically innovators, risk takers, they're marketers, they're efficient at management, and they have outstanding financial control. And so they give us a heady definition. They boil down to those 5 different traits. According to the Harvard Business School, it says that entrepreneurs are innovators, risk takers, marketing geniuses, management, and financial control. So I dug a little deeper, and I wanted to see, well, can we get more specific on the personality traits of entrepreneurs? And I found a study done by Daryl Zaharsky is how I would say it. That's probably not how you pronounce his name. It's Z-A-H-O-R-S-K-Y, Zaharsky. But I'm going to put a link to this in the show note because I thought he had a very good summary for it. So he divided personality traits of entrepreneurs into 9 different types. The first one is the improver. Now, this one typically will operate a business predominantly in improving mode. In other words, you're focusing on an issue and you're trying to figure out how to make it better. There's another personality type that he calls the advisor, and this is one who's an extremely high level of assistance and advice to customers. So it's more of a service-oriented style business. The third one he names is a superstar, and he says this personality trait is one that's full of charisma and high energy, almost like the superstar CEO. The way you'll know these guys is they often build themselves around a personal brand. I think of Gary V. He's got built around his own personal brand, the superstar. Or Dave Ramsey. He's a superstar based on this criteria. And so we easily recognize those. The fourth entrepreneur type, which I thought was intriguing to me, is the artist. And so this one's typically a very highly creative type, such things like web design or agency style businesses. Then you go to the visionary, and the visionary often builds a business based on the future vision or something where they believe the world is going to move toward. Another one is the analyst, and this is typically someone in the engineering world or the scientist. So, there are many entrepreneurs who are not the most outgoing, very extroverted people. They could be in an analyst style business. They may be run an engineering firm. Number 7 is the one that drives me crazy, and they're the fireball, is what he calls them. This is a business owner who operates with full of energy, life, and enthusiasm. Have you ever seen that person when they walk in the room? They get everything done, and like everybody's always laughing at them. This particular person, they drive me absolutely batty. The 8th one is called the hero. Now, this one was intriguing to me. Basically, your job is to assemble great companies. You're not there to produce a service. You're there to build strong teams. Number 9 is the healer. This particular person will operate in nurturing and harmony style businesses. And they have an uncanny ability to survive and persist with just a very peaceful personality. Now, I'm not sure if each of these personality traits for entrepreneurs are legit. I thought it was intriguing how Daryl put it together. Candidly, I thought it was intriguing how Harvard Business School and how 16 Personalities put all the different studies together to try to define me, an entrepreneur.
You are listening to Financially Simple, destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner.
Here's what I personally have noticed. This is not scientific. I haven't done any grants in research entrepreneurs. I'm just going to tell you what I see. Being an entrepreneur myself and working with hundreds of business owners over my life, I can tell you that number 1, entrepreneurs must have passion. We really like what we do. And money is not our motivator for most of us. Yeah, now money is an added benefit, but we genuinely like what we do. I got to tell you, and I don't mean this just tongue in cheek, I really like my career. Love it. I work with some of the best clients in the world. I work with business owners all over the United States. I show them how to reach their retirement goals. I show them how to make their companies more profitable. We work, we learn, we laugh, we cry. I can't ever tell you one particular event that has forever marked my life is when one of my dear clients, I was the second person on her phone dial once she found out her husband died unexpectedly. In that moment, I will never forget the feeling that I had to be able to tell her on the phone as we were crying together. Just good family, young family. As we were crying together, as we were dealing with this particular heartache she just was going through, being able to tell her that we did it right. You and your family are okay. Friends, that's a passion that I have. And most entrepreneurs that I know genuinely have a passion for their career, their business, what they do. Another thing I've noticed is we're motivated to reach very specific goals. In the early part of the year, every year, I'm working with our business owners on being specific in what we're trying to accomplish that year. Many times we'll say things like, hey, I want to grow my business income. I want to increase my margin, or pick whatever you want to say. But a true entrepreneur has very, very specific goals. I was talking with one of our clients the other day, and this particular client had 17 micro goals trying to achieve one meta-narrative or one big hierarchical goal. I didn't tell this particular person to do it that way, but he or she in this case wanted to reach a very specific goal. And so we're typically motivated by reaching a very specific goal. So I ask you, what's your goal that you're trying to reach? The third thing I've noticed as entrepreneurs is we're resilient. When we fall or when we fail, we get up and we go again. And when we fail, we get up and we go again. And when we get knocked down the third time, we get up and we go again. And we don't quit. No matter what comes against us, we don't quit. I read a statement by Eleanor Roosevelt, which I've forever remembered. She said, you gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face. Are you able to say to yourself, I lived through this horror. I can take the next thing which comes along. Friends, if you've been in business for a length of time, you know you're going to get punched square in the teeth. If you've not been in business and you're just starting it up, friends, you're going to get punched square in the teeth, and it's going to knock you right on your rear end. Not figuratively. I mean, you could obviously get punched by some other human. I'm talking metaphorically speaking. Something's going to come along and it's going to kick you square in the head, and you are going to be on the ground begging for mama to come to your rescue. And for those of you who say, this never happened to me, you haven't been in business long enough, because it's going to happen. I remember I had a mentor one time, actually a youth director at a church I was in, and he told me one time, he said, Justin, one day your little rubber ducky is going to get ran over by a speedboat. I've laughed about that because my little rubber ducky got sunk by a speedboat. I can remember the effect of just being a business owner. And so we're resilient. But in that resiliency, the other thing that happens is, number 4, is we're optimistic. We can focus on the end goal. For the most part, we are pretty positive people. We're not down the dumps. We're not an Eeyore off of Winnie the Pooh. We're not walking around mullygup. We're getting up, we're taking our licks, we're moving on, and we're pretty optimistic. Another thing I noticed is that we're creative. We find multiple ways to reach our goal. I laugh at this illustration, and I'm going to let you into my life a little bit. One day, whenever my brother and I were probably early teens, we may have been 14, 15, we had somehow acquired about a 10-foot long aluminum boat. And we had a pond, and I've mentioned this in past episodes, we had a pond that was probably just over the woods. But it was a couple hundred yards away from the house. And so he and I wanted to go fishing. So we took the boat down to the pond, and we didn't have a paddle. We said, we're going fishing, Mom. She goes, but you don't have a paddle. We'll figure it out. Well, we put our brains together, and we knew we couldn't pole because the pond was too deep. We didn't have a pole big enough to push the boat around. So believe it or not, we actually ended up getting shovels. And we went out for that entire summer, and we rowed our boat around the pond, catching fish, swimming, playing with shovels. We were creative. We didn't have the money to go out and buy a paddle. We didn't have the money to go out and buy a trolling motor, but that didn't stop us. We were creative in the fact that we rode with shovels. So most entrepreneurs I see, we're creative. We can figure out a way to make it work. Another thing I notice consistently, I admire people for this particular trait, is entrepreneurs have vision. They can see roads where others do not. They can see paths to various levels of success, not necessarily monetary success, but they can see paths on how to accomplish the goals that they've laid out for their team or themselves. They have vision. And more importantly, many times entrepreneurs are able to communicate that vision to teams, to customers, to clients. And that to me is admirable. Last thing I'll notice is, and this, you're probably going to shake your head on this one, most entrepreneurs are risk takers. We will take risk. Robert Kiyosaki, I read a Twitter quote from him one time, and it says, everyone can tell you the risk. An entrepreneur can see the reward. And I agree with him on that. Many people can tell you why something can be done, but an entrepreneur can tell you all the reasons why it should be done and why we have to get it done. So friends, I give you today's episode as a point to say, if we're starting a business, take a second and evaluate yourself. Do you have any of these various characteristics? Maybe you have the characteristics from the 16 personalities test. Maybe you're that personality that's an ESTP, an extrovert, a sensing, a thinking, or a perceptive person. Maybe you have the personality that Harvard identified that says you're innovating, you're risk-taking, you're a marketing genius, you're good at management, and you have good financial control. Maybe you have those personalities. Maybe you're like Daryl says, and maybe you're an improver. Maybe you're an advisor. Maybe you're that superstar who's full of high energy. You could be the artistic type. You could have vision. You'd be a visionary. You could be an analyst. You could be that fireball person full of life and energy and optimism. You could be the hero, the healer. Or friends, maybe you don't have any of those and you say, but Justin, I have passion. I know what I want. Maybe you're motivated to reach your specific goals. You're resilient. You're optimistic. You're creative. You have vision. And you're a risk taker. If you're any of these, then friends, this is for you. I'm going to tell you that now's the time. Quit making excuses. If you are an entrepreneur, let's start a business. And with this discussion of self-evaluation, I'd like to thank you for joining me on the Financially Simple podcast. As always, the show notes and links to today's podcast can be found at financiallysimple.com under the heading podcast, obviously. In our next episode, we're going to begin discussion around the business plan. What is it? How does it work? Why should we use one, and much more? And that may take a couple of episodes to get through actually what a business plan is. If you like the show, please subscribe. Share the podcast with other business owners. Hey, feel free to drop me a note on a particular topic that you're like, Justin, I'd really like to hear you say about this. That's actually what we did in one of our past episodes. Listeners sent me an email and they said, hey, Justin, I'd really like to hear you talk about ESOPs. And you can go through my blog, Financially Simple. You can send me a question from there. You can sign up for our weekly newsletter to stay up to date. I send a newsletter out. We've got thousands of people who receive this every week. And we give a tax tip. We give business planning tips, wealth management tips. The list is extensive on this newsletter. Maybe you'd like to sign up for that. But regardless, like I say every week, life is hard. Life is good. Life can be downright frustrating. The last thing, guys, money doesn't have to be. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Hey, y'all make it a great day.
You have been listening to the Financially Simple podcast. The information in this show is for informational purposes only. This show is not investment advice. Instead, seek help from a competent financial advisor. Justin Goodbread, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Heritage Investors, a registered investment advisor.